Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Nate S., Mike P., Chuck C., and Brent S. A new guest has joined us on the program today. Mr. Jamie Beck has joined us. Jamie is the president and CEO of Filo Mining, a copper-focused project developer advancing the Filo del Sol project, which sits on the Argentine-Chile border, San Juan province. Filo Mining is part of the Lundin Group. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol FIL, with imminent uplist to the TSX main board soon. And Filo is also listed on the US OTC markets under the symbol FLMMF. Mr. Beck, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Jamie, lots to talk about here, but how about just a quick company overview here?
Sure. So Filo Mining, we are a copper, gold, silver explorer in South America. The project sits on the border between Chile and Argentina. About 90% of the resource and all of the exploration work that we've advanced over the past couple of seasons is in San Juan province, Argentina. There's a small portion of the project that extends over the border into Chile. It's really a project in two parts, Andrew. It's got an oxidized portion that sits on top. All of the early drilling at Filo del Sol was focused on defining that oxide cap and advancing the engineering work. So we put a pre-feasibility study out on that portion of the deposit in January of 2019 and showed good economic, robust returns. Certainly at today's metal prices, it looks even better. But before we advanced that too far, we knew that underlying that oxide cap was a much bigger project. And so we embarked on some deeper drilling. And over the past 3 seasons now, we've identified just an enormous mineralized zone, about 4.5 kilometers of strike north-south. It's about 1 kilometer east-west, almost 1.5 kilometers at depth to date, and continues to be open in lots of directions. So certainly we've hit just a huge mineralized area. And in addition to that size and scale, in May of this last year, we put out a result that hit substantial grades. There was a section in there of 163 meters of greater than 5.4% copper equivalent, and was quite an exceptional result. So we're really excited about Filo, and the plans for the next, call it 12 to 18 months are really to continue to try and drill this off, define the resource. It remains open to the north, to the south, to the east, and at depth. So we'll see about trying to find the edges of this monster, as well as look towards defining and building our geological model in the center of the deposit and understanding it a little more geologically.
Jamie, that sounds great. I appreciate the overview. You took the words here from a monster, was certainly describing this here as you guys continue to delineate how big it really is. But let's go back for just a moment, Jamie. Why don't you talk about yourself for a moment, throw your resume at us, and tell us why you're qualified for the job.
Sure. I'm a mechanical engineer. I spent my early career working in the steel industry in and around the Toronto area with Stelco and Dofasco, doing machine design work. I got involved in some big projects there, and I guess always had the question a little bit of where and who and how the decisions were being made to spend multi-million dollars on upgrading a processing line, that kind of thing. So I always had a sort of a trend towards the business side. I had a great opportunity actually to chase my wife out west. She was completing her medical training and placed at UBC. So we moved out to Vancouver. I went back to school and did an MBA, which had a co-op placement. And during that co-op, I landed in the corporate development group with Teck Resources, and had a chance to gain some exposure to a big mining company and their corporate development function. Saw a bunch of projects, spent some time at Trail at the smelters. It was a great experience. Unfortunately for me, in terms of timing, that was global financial crisis. Their share price, I think, went from about $60 to just touching over $4 in a short period of time. So there wasn't a job at the end of that. And I connected at the time with a fellow named Paul Conabare, who was running corporate development for Lundin Mining. I convinced him to let me come on and do some financial modeling for an asset that we had in the DRC at Tenke-Fungurume. And so I started in with Paul in 2009, and that was really my foot in the door with the Lundin group. Through the years, I guess the career has grown there. I ended up transitioning from the Lundin Mining Corp Dev Group, and at the time I was working with Freeport on the engineering studies as we were expanding Tenke. And so I got involved in running the engineering studies with some of the junior exploration companies in Vancouver. That was NGX Resources at the time. So I worked on Los Alados and Jose Maria and Filo del Sol with Wojtek Wadzicki and Adam Lundin and the Bob Carmichael, the great geology team that had made those discoveries, and had an opportunity to take over the helm at Filo in June of 2020. So I'm pretty green in this role and still learning, but I think I've got some history with the group, and hopefully I'm the right person to guide as we continue to grow.
Well, Jamie, for the junior natural resource sector, I think you're overqualified, sir, but nonetheless, good to have you on, and pretty diverse here as well, which I think is a plus, and then also your experience with some of the majors out there. How about just a snapshot of the capital structure here, shares outstanding, cash on hand, and also the major holders?
Very straightforward. There's 113 million shares out. There's no warrants or anything that's plain equity. I think we've got as many juniors do, a 10% stock option plan. So there's probably just over 7 million shares out on that. So fully diluted, call it 119 million shares. Major shareholder is the Lundin family and the Lundin family trusts. They hold just over 34% of the company. Board and management have a piece as well as some institutions. CD Capital, which was one that got involved, Carmel Daniel, they put a substantial placement into our last equity raise, and Carmel sits on the board. And then there's a big group, as per many of these Lundin companies, that follow along in Sweden and Europe. We trade in Canada on the main board on the TSX. We also trade on the OMX in Sweden, and so you've got a big group of European and Swedish shareholders that follow along and trade the story as well.
Well, let's get into the drilling program here. First, has the contract driller been selected for this rig expansion? And if so, can you share who it is, and have they been mobilized?
Yeah, we put out our plans for the drill season earlier this year. There's started off with 3 rigs, and we'll be adding 2 more rigs to that in October or maybe early November timeframe as soon as we can. Those rigs were the exact same ones that we had on site last year. So we had 2 drill contractors. We're working with Bort Longyear. They had 3 rigs for us, and we've got those secured. And the other one is a local Argentine company called Falcon AGV. They have 2 rigs, and we've got those secured. So we'll have those 5 rigs for sure. And then we'll look to try and add an additional 2 rigs by the end of the year. We're in some discussions right now, not only with Bort Longyear about additional capacity on their end, but maybe some new partnerships as well down in Argentina. So we haven't quite settled on where or how to staff and get those last 2 rigs, but we've certainly got 5 locked up for now.
Very well. Jamie, how about the expansion program here as far as the details in the drill plan? Will you guys be providing additional information and details as far as the depth and the azimuth, similar to what you guys did with the April 2021 program?
Yeah, look for probably a bit more color as we get closer towards having results. So maybe with our first press release, happy to add on some drill traces from where we're putting holes in and where the collars are and angles that we're planning on dip azimuth, what we're trying to hit. So we'll definitely include that information as we start to release some of our results. 3 main objectives, I guess, from the drill program this year. Number 1 is to follow up on the really high grade intersection that we had in hole 41. So in fact, the first 3 holes that we have going are going to be 50-meter step outs from that hole. Classically at Filo, we stepped out in the 200-meter range to 500-meter range in between holes. So we're really tightening it up around hole 41. We'll do a step out to the east, to the west, and to the south to begin with. So that's where our first 3 holes are going. And then as we add more rigs and as we complete some of the holes, the 2 other objectives for the season are to focus on about a 1 kilometer cubed zone that span the gap between hole 34 to the south and hole 41 to the north. That's an area where we're seeing consistent grades at depth above 0.7% copper equivalent. So we'll focus there on trying to build out our geological model for that small subset of the overall deposit. And then we'll continue to keep a bunch of drill rigs exploring as we look to the north, northeast, maybe a few targets to the south. We'll definitely keep 25-30% of the meters for pure exploration and see if we can try and touch the edge of the system.
And with the expected drilling, I believe you guys said something around the lines of 7,000 meters by year end. Is that still accurate, or do you have an update on actual rates this far and if that number is going to maybe jump up more or maybe decrease?
Yeah, we always struggle to put out good estimates. We try our best, but it's so dependent on drill productivity, on the weather. For example, this season we started a lot earlier and have been really optimistic about our winterization efforts and view towards trying to get the drills turning year round. But as always at the beginning of the season, you end up with a few mechanical breakdowns or the weather shuts you down for a few days. So we tend to budget about 13 to 14 meters per day. It's really, frankly, in the industry, that's really slow in terms of advance rates for diamond drilling. And I guess it comes down to a couple of issues. We've often struggled to have good productivity. Those 15 meters a day, let's call it, ends up being 4 days at 30 or 40 meters, and then 4 days with the rig getting 0 meters and onward. So I think if we can improve those 0 meter days or eliminate those 0 meter days, then we can be probably get more meterage than we're guiding, because when the drills are turning, they're actually more effective. So it's hard to gauge. We'll stick with the 7,000 meters at least for now before year end, and hopefully we can exceed that. And certainly by the time we get into 2022, we will have had those 5 rigs at least going for 4 or 5 months, and we'll get a sense of how productive they've been, how the crews are working, if they've been able to increase their productivity, and put out some better estimates for 2022.
Jamie, give the audience a flavor for the temperatures up there and then very high elevation, but the snowfall in that area is probably very, very little, is my suspicion. Maybe just give us a flavor of the conditions.
Yeah, the conditions I can describe as windy. It's definitely severe working conditions out there. Certainly in the winter months, which they're just coming out of now. It tends to get nicer, and classically when we've run our drill programs, it's been from that November through March timeframe. And so the sweet spot, January, February, March, that's when we tend to run site visits. And Lucas always gives us a hard time because every single time he's been to site, it's been a nice warm, let's call it 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, the sun's shining, no wind, it's beautiful. But we definitely have evidence of much harsher conditions than that. It doesn't get like Canadian Arctic cold. So the actual temperature bands from summer to winter, the coldest it would get up there would be minus 20 degrees Celsius in the depths of sort of winter. And then in summertime, as I say, it gets 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. Certainly the winds are an issue. Very little precipitation. This is the Atacama Desert, and when it does come, it often comes as a light snowfall or a dusting, and very quickly tends to sublimate. The solar intensity is so strong that immediately that snowfall sort of is gone from the ground. Other than the elevation and the winds, it's very favorable to work up there.
Appreciate you giving us a flavor on that. How about assays? Any issues at the lab? Do you see that this stuff's going to come out on news release full core, or do you see it just coming out as partial prior to full results? How's things looking on the lab side?
Last year we had results back anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, I guess, from the time that the samples actually made their way from site to the lab. We try to stick towards releasing full holes as best we can. I think that gives investors and shareholders a better picture, but certainly if there's been occasions in the past where we've released partial assay results for portions of the hole where often we'll save that when we think that, maybe there's a slightly different story to tell. And a great example there was, in April last year, we put out partial results from holes 37 and holes 41. Those partial results were focused particularly on a zone that we went through that's very precious metals rich. So it was nice for us to be able to put out, just a subset of results focusing on the precious metals nature of that and some of the implications that it meant in terms of our silver zone and things like that at site. Ultimately, those partial assays got rolled into bigger copper hits, including the really special hole 41 that we put out in May a few months later. So, we tend to be a little strategic on how we want to release results, but our preference is at least guiding us that usually we try for full results of the full drill hole.
Jamie, VP Exploration Bob Carmichael isn't here with us to describe his take on hole 41, but you've talked to him. What is his view on hole 41 here? What's your guys' plan to extend work around that area? I'm sure that this is the predominant focus for you guys.
Bob's he's a man that doesn't always show his emotions on his sleeve, and certainly when I got that phone call from Bob into the high grade stuff, what an exciting day for not only him but the whole geological team that spent so long on site and working this. It's just what a tribute. Obviously, he was super excited, and what's been extremely strange this year, Andrew, of course, is that we haven't been able to get down to site. So he hasn't actually been to Argentina yet with COVID travel restrictions. He hasn't had a chance to lay his eyes on the core. So it's been talking to our local geologists and photographs and sharing thoughts over Zoom calls and screen shares, that kind of stuff. So two, I guess, main working hypotheses at the moment. One of them, and I mentioned it earlier in the show, we have this high-grade precious metals zone that's sort of flat-lying. We call it our M silver zone, and it sits out as a flat-lying or area that extends north-south. And so there's a view that maybe this high-grade hit in hole 41 tagged a feeder zone to that, where this rich mineralization came up through some form of vertical structure and then hit a porous area higher up in the deposit that capped it and caused the fluids to extend laterally and form that flat-lying silver zone. 41 had a high-grade section. That 163 meters was over 180 gram per ton silver. The other, I guess, theory that may be going on here, and again, I'm starting to get out of my depth because I don't have a geology background, as we learned at the beginning of the show. But I understand that as you get these porphyry intrusives coming in, you can get this sort of cupola that forms at the top part of that, and those can be very, very high grade and tend to be sort of an inverted crescent shape. So that would guide to it being less of a vertical structure and maybe more of a flat-lying structure. So clearly a bunch of work for us to do in terms of defining that and understanding it. And that's, Andrew, what the first three drill holes are. We're focused on those 50-meter step outs because we want to figure out where we tag that high-grade material in space underground. Hopefully guide us a little bit on which of those theories make sense and where we're going to be able to start drilling to chase additional high-grade hits.
Interesting. How about in your talk with Diego, with Pepe and Charlie as well? Any emotion, any comments out of them on this here as far as the results? And also, you guys tend to all probably agree on what the focus is next, but any other comments on that?
Well, I can only say that I think getting geologists of their pedigree involved in the story is a huge stamp of approval. I think whenever you're into a discovery or a deposit like Filo del Sol, geologists around the world are going to be pining to get involved. It's few and far between that you get to sort of be in on the ground floor of of what we think is growing into a very, very unique deposit, one that's going to rank with these giant metal discoveries that are few and far between globally and over time. So it's been an honor to welcome those guys as part of the team. I think they're just digging into it now. Pepe's been spending his time in Copiapó. He's Chilean based, so he's been logging the core that's in Copiapó, which is where we'd stored all of our drill core up and until the stuff that came out from this past drill season. I guess anything up to about hole 34 he's got access to now, and then we're working at getting him across into Argentina to start looking at some of the drill core that we pulled out last year. He's a world-renowned porphyry geologist. He's going to help out with our own guys and help mentor them, guide them about how to log, the structures that they're seeing, the different lithologies that they're tagging, and help guide what then forms as the next piece of the puzzle, which then gets up to Charlie Grieg and associates and his team, where those guys are going to help us work on taking the information from the core logging and developing and building out our geological model. So, clearly, even amongst our team, Diego and Bob, there's lots of expertise and capacity, but this has just turned into such a huge job that having additional firepower here is really going to help make sure that we've, all the dollars that we're spending into the ground to get this drill core out is going to turn itself into bomb-proof models.
Appreciate you sharing some more details there. Let's see what happens next year, but this is quickly getting very large and looking forward to seeing more results here. We already talked a little bit about, where you guys are going to be focused at predominantly. You've talked about maybe touching down on the southern end of things, checking things out there as well. We'll forgo that. We know what you're going to do there. So also, just for note, some Filo investors have expressed interest in more field photos of the program. Hopefully you can add more photos as we go here. How about metallurgical program? Anything on that front you want to update on?
Yeah, no, it's Metwork's going to be a big part of our upcoming program. We dabbled a little bit in that from some of our drilling last year. So again, just to remind listeners, it's really a project in two parts. The uppermost oxide part, we've got substantial network into that at pre-feasibility level, column leach tests, substantial variability tests through that oxide zone. So our understanding, at least of the oxide response, is very well defined and developed. As we start this deeper drilling and we look at how to process the sulfides, lots more for us to learn there. We did some preliminary work this year. Early on, I guess there's two subsets of samples that we took. We took some stuff from hole 25 to the south, which was very clean, simple, no problems. It produced a good saleable grade copper concentrate with very, very low deleterious elements. And then we took some stuff from the higher grade portion of the deposit around hole 32. And certainly that's an area where the metallurgy is going to be a little more complex. That had the higher grades, and along with those higher grades came some deleterious elements. But at this point in time, all of the work has guided that we're going to be able to create a nice saleable concentrate. It's just really a matter of additional costs for some of the downstream processing. So we'll advance our thoughts there, do a bunch more network this year, probably take some sample from hole 41 and the high grade that's going on there. So yeah, it'll be a big met program planned for this next drill program.
Jamie, when do you expect to incorporate results into, I assume, a revised pre-feasibility study? Is that something that folks can expect in 2022 sometime?
That's a great question. Fundamentally, Andrew, that's what we as a board and as a management team, I think that's probably our biggest decision to make over the next 12 or 18 months. It's how much longer do we continue to spend drilling things off and learning about the size and shape and geometry and really the value ultimately of what we're sitting on here, and where along that continuum of drill results do we pause and refocus on the engineering work to, I guess, advance our thoughts on design and ultimately getting closer to cash flow. So I don't have a great answer there. I think this past year was proof that adding value through the drill bit at Filo remains a priority. I think at least the next 12 months is pretty simple for me in terms of drilling and continuing to learn about the deposit geologically. But no question, at some point in time, we're going to have to shift gears and focus on the best way to start moving this forward towards development. I know you had Adam Lundin on the other day, and I encourage all of your listeners to take a look at this Filo deposit in almost in combination and jointly with what's happening at Jose Maria. It's 12 kilometers away. As that project advances through fiscal stability agreement with the government, environmental permits, and then as it moves towards construction, all the synergies of potential infrastructure sharing that come along with that, power, water, roads, everything that sort of ties into a big project that's going to be 12 kilometers away. That's going to open up opportunities for us to look at Filo and how we might engineer and think about extracting and creating value out of the sulfide resource as well, and whether or not there's potential for us to piggyback a little bit on the work that they're doing. So let's see how the district plays out over the next, call it 2 years, but at least my next 12 months is pretty straightforward. Drill, drill, drill.
Well, look, I think you can do things in parallel, all these programs, and I think the market will support these multiple initiatives at the same time, and that the drill probably continues to turn. Given where it's at here, I think that the market will support that and the finances will support that. Yes, Adam and I did speak about a week ago, and it appears Jose Maria is going to be potentially leading the first finance and infrastructure build out for the district. As you noted, of course, Los Helados is part of this as well. Give us your thoughts on how you see this kind of coming together as far as some of the shared infrastructure. I know Adam seemed very confident with water on his side. Given that you guys have the largest market capitalization of the group, how do you see this going? I'm interested to see how this all comes together because, as you say, it really is a district. And obviously, if Jose Maria gets permitting, it's positive for Filo. Well, of course, any financing is difficult, Jamie, but for the Lundin Group and what you guys have access to, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start with the second question first. What a privilege, really, to have had the success that we did last year, and certainly raising dollars, at wherever we are today, $9 a share versus the last time I had to do it at $1.85 is beneficial for all the shareholders, right? It's going to be substantially less dilution for us to get dollars in the door. I think anytime that investors have potential exposure to a world-class project like Filo del Sol, it's not going to be that difficult to raise the money. In fact, I'm gonna have an arm wrestle, I'm sure, with Lucas over how much of it's available out there for anybody else. From his perspective, he's onto the greatest copper discovery in decades. So why on earth would he not continue to invest in fact, continue to build his position within the company? The dollars, what a great position to be in. Not every junior mining company is in that place. So what a privilege. I think as we shift towards how this district gets developed, let's see. At the beginning, these projects were all in one. They were all as part of NGX Resources, and for various reasons, we split them up. Many conversations went into that as to why and whether or not it made sense. And at the end of the day, our feeling was that there were different investors out there who wanted to put their dollars in for different reasons. And, if you imagine Filo and Jose Maria as a combined entity today, you've got a dollar that comes in the door. What happens? Do you put it into the ground to drill off Filo, or do you save that dollar for the ultimate multi-billion-dollar capital that's going to be required to build out Jose Maria? So you get to that position where you're choosing capital allocation as a management team, as opposed to letting shareholders make that decision. And I think that was the rationale between the split, was that we wanted to give shareholders the choice. Did you want to fund the exciting sort of exploration story building at Filo, or did you want to fund that near-term development story at building at Jose Maria? And I always encourage people to be like the Lundins and fund both. Ultimately, I think there is great possibility for some joint development scenario to grow here. Certainly, you're not going to build $2-3 billion worth of infrastructure 12 kilometers away and not find a way to maximize that and use that strategically. And certainly with the Lundin family being the largest shareholder of both companies, they're going to look to try and capitalize on those synergies and find ways to develop this as a bit of a district. Ultimately, it has size and scale here that we could be mining copper, gold, and silver for decades upon decades at Filo del Sol plus Jose Maria. So there's probably room for another partner, somebody to come in and help share the risk and share that development build. But that's if that pulls together, great. If not, I think it's in that unique position where the Lundins have the ability to move these projects forward themselves, and we'll look towards how to play the puzzle pieces together, play the chess game, and figure out how to create shareholder value despite the difference in the company lines at this point in time.
A good set of options, and I'm sure Lucas is talking to Bob Friedland and saying, "Look, I told you so." But I guess along that line, I mean, certainly the company has the ability to keep this in, but my suspicion is if it hasn't already happened, I'm sure it has, but I'm sure there's some discussion amongst the majors, and that hopefully we'll start to see what those discussions lead to next year and the years ahead here as Jose Maria gets kicked off, and also to see how you guys structure this infrastructure build out. How about on regulatory permitting challenges, Jamie? Predominantly Argentine focused here, but essentially Jose Maria will be the coat. And do you see, really any issues of note on the regulatory front? Adam and I talked about this, and it seems that that's going along quite well.
Yeah, I won't rehash all of that. What we're doing at Filo is, as you would with any earlier stage project, we identify the area of influence by which the mine is going to impact, and you draw a radius around that and advance your early stage environmental baseline work. So we're collecting water samples in that area of influence. We're doing our flora and fauna studies. We've got a big cryology, glaciology program where we're monitoring the glaciers and taking permafrost measurements, that kind of stuff. So we're continuing that baseline data collection. At this point in time, we're not far enough advanced on the engineering side to start working towards any kind of ESI, environmental permitting applications beyond what we're advancing as in terms of drill programs. So largely that regulatory effort is going to be driven by Jose Maria and the work that they're doing in Argentina, and hopefully sets the playbook for us. And in the meantime, we're continuing to build that database so that when we are ready to go, we'll have the years of data collection behind us, and developing that environmental baseline and ultimately submitting for permits and support is going to be fairly straightforward for us.
We'll see how Adam goes with Jose Maria here, and some of those results we should be seeing sometime first half next year. How about to tie on to this, your ESG efforts, Jamie? Always like to try to bring this up here in the current conditions in the market. Any specific work initiatives being carried out that you'd like to point out at this point for Filo? I know it's still relatively early stage for the company, but any maybe community initiatives is what I like to focus on. Anything on that front you want to mention?
Certainly at this point in time, Andrew, our biggest focus is on employment and our ability to try and hire locally, to provide jobs locally. We put a big focus on making sure that our drill teams at site, as many as we can from San Juan province, and then certainly where we can't, some of the surrounding ones, whether it's Mendoza or La Rioja. So we're trying our best locally to hire, because those are the dollars that get paid out, and those are the dollars that then make their way back through the system at restaurants and hotels and all the bits and pieces that go around having a mining project going. Certainly, both in Chile and in Argentina, we've got great community programs and discussions ongoing there. We work closely with the Palito community on the Chilean side of the border. They're our closest community. Been working with them since probably about 2013 through both Los Helados and NGX when these were all together, and then carried on those programs at Filo. So we try and hire locally for road clearing, and we use the local transportation company out of the community there. So again, I think our focus, at least at this point in time, isn't so much program based as it is on trying to provide as many jobs and economic development to the regions as we can. I guess the broader theme on ESG there is that we've got the backing of the Lundin Foundation, who are really world experts in helping guide responsible mineral development policy. And I point to Lundin Gold all the time as how that can be done effectively, and the awards that they've won in developing that Fruta del Norte mine in Ecuador, which is a really challenging build from an ESG perspective, and they've come through that with flying colors. So having an ability for our company to rely on that guidance early on has been great. And then even a further step back, copper in and of itself, talking about the green metal and the the electrification of the globe, certainly as we look towards different energy sources, moving away from coal and moving towards greener sources, you're going to need more copper. I think that, even at a very high level, that plays well into investment themes here as a green metal, and hopefully a way that we can do that responsibly and get it out of the ground responsibly.
Jamie, I appreciate that. Maybe just give us an 18-month look ahead here on some of the major objectives you'd like to accomplish here.
Yeah, I guess milestones, some are within our own control, some outside of that. From our own perspective, it's going to be drill results. Likely, we got off to a bit of a slower start than I'd hoped this year, so likely early results in November or early December at latest. So then it should be fairly consistent in terms of drilling news after that. Other than drilling, we'll be working towards our metallurgical test work program. So there may be some news that comes out as we've got results to share on the met work, as well as then turning that into our resource modeling work. And as we build that out, we'll make a decision as to whether or not it makes sense to put out an initial inferred resource. We're having some internal discussions on the value of that. And I guess on one hand, there's certainly value in being able to more scientifically say, hey, this is what it is. It turns it from a bit of a dream into reality. But the downside of that is sometimes that sets a pin in it and cuts off people's view of the dream here. And if we're not able to tighten up the drill spacing across the full span of 4 or 5 kilometers of strike, then that initial inferred resource would probably end up being a lot smaller than the overall global upside here. So is there value in just continuing to focus on the drill bit and continuing on drilling it off without putting a pin in it? So we'll make a call on that as the year progresses. So look for drill results from us, met work, potentially looking at initial inferred resource. Out of our control would be update Cerro Josemaria, so fiscal stability with Argentina, environmental permits, and a big push on project finance and getting that project moving forward.
Jamie, that sounds good, and I'm sure there's a number of participants already putting together their estimates in the background here, certainly some on the investor front as well. So we'll continue to see what happens here, and also when you guys decide to bring out your confirmation of what we have here. How about further listings? You guys are just getting onto the TSX here. We've seen a lot of juniors and mid-tier companies, call it the 500 million to billion market cap or so, tend to dual list on the TSX and also the NYSE Amex. Would a U.S. listing upgrade be on the deck in the next year or two?
It's not on the radar right now, Andrew. We'll take a look, obviously, at anything that we think is going to ultimately add value and create more opportunities for new investors to get involved in the story, create more opportunities to generate more liquidity in the story. Certainly, you have to enter the U.S. Not lightly and understand the regulatory requirements there. And I know that even within our Lundin group of companies, that's been met with mixed success over the years. So certainly we'll take a look at it, but it's not on the radar at the moment.
Always have to ask, so appreciate you considering it there. Well, to close out, Jamie, for potential investors, all types listening in, Filo Mining stands at about $1 billion Canadian. What would you say to investors at these current price levels?
World-class copper discoveries of size, scale, and grade like Filo Mining are rare. And this is an opportunity to get involved in one, which, despite our recent success, I believe is still in the early days. of understanding just the how special this could be, the size and scale here. So, I think don't take a look at the share price chart over the past year and think that somehow or another you've missed the boat. I have no doubt in my mind that in the fullness of time, when we advance our drilling and we have additional news coming out that will continue to see strong share price appreciation, these types of assets don't come around that often. So I think it's a great time to get involved in Filo. I think we've got an exciting program in front of us, and I encourage anyone to take a look.
Well said, Jamie. And do you have the Filo socks on?
I'm not wearing them today, although I've been gradually giving them out to supportive shareholders and people interested.
Well, we'll add some coats and some good Panamanian coffee with the Filo markings on it.
There you go.
And the best way for investors to reach out to the company.
Listen, I'm always available to talk to investors. So touch base, info@filo-mining.com. Trevor is our head of IR. He's happy to talk to people. You can touch base with us over social media. I think we're on Twitter. There's Instagram. There's LinkedIn. Don't hesitate to reach out that way or through the website. Send a note off to Trevor, and he'll put you in touch with me. So lots of ways to connect with Filo.
Jamie, thanks for taking the time to introduce Filo. Looking forward to seeing further progress, sir.
Thanks so much for having me on, and appreciate your time today.